record. Okay, and then yeah, see, people are trickling in. So for everyone that's trickling in, this whole session will be recorded and be placed on the ACC FIT website, and I'll put the link in a bit. So we'll go ahead and I'll introduce you, Tina, and then you can start. So thank you guys for all joining. I recognize a lot of familiar faces and names. My name's Natalie Tepasker. I'm one of the cardiology fellows at Stanford, soon to be a heart failure fellow here. And I am the Northern California ACC FIT Catalyst, which means that I help direct programming and educational programming for FITs, along with my counterpart, Nikhil, who was just on the screen with his adorable baby. And I'll let Nikhil also introduce himself as well.
Thanks, Natalie. You're too kind. My name is Nikhil. I'm one of the interventional fellows at Loma Linda in Southern California, and I've had the pleasure of being Natalie's sidekick this academic year. I think we have really exciting programming on this evening, so apologize for my voice and my mask. But say hi to Max. He's going to join this evening. He's probably our youngest member. I think you'll all find a lot of really wonderful things from the session this evening, and thank you all for being here.
Awesome. And these sessions are usually very informal, and the purpose of these sessions are to help with professional development in a very casual setting where you can feel free to ask questions, anything that you don't feel comfortable asking in more formal settings in your programs. And so tonight's event is essentially how to attend a conference. So we're hearing from two experts who practice in different specialties in cardiology, practice in two different parts of the country, and are in two different stages of their careers. And so we'll hear interesting takes on how to attend a conference. So our first speaker tonight is Dr. Tina Bakener. She's a cardiac electrophysiologist and an instructor of medicine at Stanford University. She completed her training in internal medicine, cardiovascular medicine, advanced heart failure at University of California, San Diego, followed by an EP fellowship at Stanford. Her research interests include outcomes research, epidemiology, and mechanisms of rhythm disorders. She's currently funded by the NIH to study patient-related outcomes regarding AFib ablation. She's received prior funding from the American Heart Association and Heart Rhythm Society. She's also an active member of AHA, ACC, HRS, and ESC, and she's published over 200 papers, book chapters, and abstracts, including over 80 original peer-reviewed articles, and delivered over 40 invited presentations in national and international meetings. She also serves as an associate editor, section editor, and editorial board member of 4 EP journals. We're super excited that she's here today, and we'll be kicking off this session on how to attend a conference. Thank you, Dr. Bakener.
Nikhil, Natalie, thank you so much for having me join this. It's actually a topic I'm so passionate about because the conferences were the most fun part of my residency and fellowship training, and hope I get to share my experience and in retrospect what worked, what could have worked better, what I've done that really helped me out. Very happy to talk about those. I know you had a few questions already in the calendar invitation. The first one was strategies for networking at a large conference, which is kind of the most fun part about conferences, in my opinion. It's the networking part. And I think it starts with how to make it to a conference to begin with, right? As a resident, as a fellow, you get to go to any conference you may want, and that's usually the big meetings like ACC, scientific sessions, or the AHA. But one way to make it more accessible for networking is actually to submit an abstract, which is fairly easy as a fellow. There's always something as simple as a case report of an interesting case that you encountered as a fellow, or some small project that you get to work on with your mentors that you get to submit. And in my opinion, I think you should submit many. I think the odds are 1 out of 5, 2 out of 5 will get accepted. So it never hurts to try many, and sometimes it's a little bit of luck. But once you get in, I think it opens the door a little bit more for networking, because now you get to be present at the meeting with a purpose, but it exposes you to people there. You hang your poster. Sometimes I see fellows hanging their posters and disappearing. Could be due to anxiety, due to just anxiety not to want to have questions about the work. But I think that is your chance for networking, that you're not there to fend questions necessarily. You're there to say hi to the people that come by and want to hear more about you personally and potentially your work as well. So that opens the door for networking, but not just your poster, be present at your friends' poster, your co-fellows posters, that then you're there, to again meet other people, senior or junior, that's coming by. Another thing that really helped me is social media. And I know you advertise this event, and ACC is huge on social media. And just as a disclosure, I was Jack's social media editor for many years when I was a cardiology fellow, actually, and onwards to EP fellowship and attending. So being present on social media ahead of time to the meeting can help you a little bit navigate these meetings for networking. If there is a person, a junior or a senior colleague that you'd like to network with at a meeting, it never hurts to reach out to them ahead of the meeting saying, hello, I would love to meet you for this reasons. Would you have any time during the meeting? Worst case, it won't be, it will be ignored, but I can assure you most of the time, if you reach out to someone on social media, on Twitter, they'll get back to you with some answer saying either they're too busy, but they'd love to meet you, see if they can make it work. I've met many of my mentors who have then become my NIH grant or supporting people through this kind of reaching out via social media and then meeting them at national meetings who are from the US or Canada, I should say. Another role of social media might be being the social media ambassadors for the conferences, which can really broaden your reach during the meeting. Almost all meetings, for example, Heart Rhythm Society meeting is one, I'm sure ACC works the same. They all have social media ambassadors for the meeting. Oftentimes are fellows in training whose job is to attend sessions and post about the sessions with the appropriate hashtags of ACC, etc., and inform people to share, to spread the meeting. And that can increase your visibility, but also help other people see you to then and have your name become familiar so that, when you reach out to those people, senior or junior, they recognize you as the social media ambassador of the meeting, and you're likely to be able to get to meet with anyone you want. Another strategy, other than reaching out through social media to the people you might want to network with, stalking people, I think also works quite well in these meetings. A lot of the senior people, of course, when you reach out to them, what you don't realize is they're not just there for the meeting. They're not there just to present a talk. They have advisory board meetings, they have writing group meetings, they have journal meetings. So their day is insanely packed. But when they have time is when they're walking from one room to another room. So if there's a specific mentor, a specific senior person you'd love to meet, I usually don't even attend the talk. I show up as the talk is ending, as I know they would be leaving one conference room towards another place, and then try to catch them with a specific question or just introduce myself to them. So a bit of an untraditional path, but I think it works for networking. Last but not least, I think people who can guide you are your own mentors from your own institution, because they're there, they already have a broad reach, they already know a lot of people, and they know you and they like you. So if you're just by your mentor or by your senior faculty at these meetings, just naturally you will meet a lot of people that may be of interest to you. And often attendings are very happy to introduce you when they're seeing their close friends that they want to say hi to. They say, hi, this is Natalie, by the way. She's a fellow she's a star fellow. And then if this happens over and over and over at 4 conferences, now they're gonna remember the Natalie, the fellow that's always next to that attending, and it can really increase your visibility and your reach as a fellow as well. And lastly, beyond the meeting, there's a lot of post-meeting events. There's always a happy hour event. There's always a dinner that is of your institution or another institution. I think it's good to ask around about them. Sometimes as fellows, you don't hear much about these beyond your own institution's happy hour, say at ACC or AHA. But if you meet a fellow and from a different institution, I think it's always a good idea to ask them what they have going on in the evening. And that may, and then you can always crash other events, which I always did happily. And that can really open your world to different institutions, different mentors, different co-fellows, which can really expand the meeting for you. That's about all I had for strategies for networking. I don't know, Natalie, if you want me to keep talking or have questions.
Sure, maybe we can take a quick pause and see if anyone has a question. And if not, I have a question that I can ask. If people are too shy, also you can put them in the chat. We can ask for you. So how do you select which meeting you're going to go to begin with? Will you go to ACC and target the EP related content, or will you go to HRS and find all your mentors there? Like how do you select?
I think it's a little tricky, right? If I were a cardiology fellow, and this is pure personal preference, if I were into general cardiology, prevention, etc., and my biggest, most relevant meeting is ACC, that's what I would go to. But if I were like Nikhil, or definitely EP bound, even from the early years of cardiology fellowship, I think the subspecialty meetings provide you a more focused environment to be able to network, but also get better content, even as a fellow, academically and practically too, because there are more fellow-specific interventional cardiology courses, sessions, I should say, at SCAI. There are more academic sessions that are just interventional focus at SCAI, same as HRS, which was just last weekend. So if I know the subspecialty I'm going to, HSFA, HRS or SCAI would be my meetings, and I may be missing some other imaging and prevention focused meetings too. Earlier on, medicine residency, early cardiology fellowship, I think those are the times that I chose the bigger meetings. I think it's too big. If you already have an area of focus, it's too big to find the relevant people to you that you want to network with or you want to learn from. In terms of big meetings versus small meetings, now that let's say you have an area of focus, there's AHRS, and there is Western atrial fibrillation, there's Orlando AF, there's about 5-6 smaller programs that are all welcoming fellows, that all have abstract sessions, competition sessions for fellows in training. So how do you pick between a bigger meeting, be it a subspecialty meeting versus a small meeting? That's always a tough one, because in the small meetings, you actually can get FaceTime with anyone and everyone you'd like, because it is a small meeting, because there's only one room running usually in the smaller meetings with one session. Everyone is in that session, and a much smaller, much more manageable in terms of networking. In terms of your CV and what's worth for your CV, if you're presenting or submitting an abstract, of course, the bigger the meeting is, the more valuable it will be for your CV. But for personal networking reasons, I think the smaller meetings can add to you more.
Does anyone else have a follow-up question? Or we can have Tina keep going until 6 o'clock.
Oh my goodness, let's not do that.
Okay.
But I think your second question was how to get the most out of most of the content at a meeting. And the answer is, of course, different. If you're at a small meeting with only one room running, that's great. You just sit there, and usually the talks are fast-paced and entertaining, and from all the best people in the world, just 6 minutes following each other. Usually the content is not in the smaller meetings, not brand new, but you'll hear the latest that was just presented at, say, ACC or the bigger meetings. But if you're a fellow at a big meeting, if you're a cardiology fellow at a big meeting, and this is now too big, right? You have the program on your phone and it's insane. There are about 70 rooms running at the same time. I think the biggest sessions to attend are late-breaking clinical trials, right? Because everyone in the meeting, when you're back, when you're there, will be talking about that. So it would at least be a good idea, one, to see the stage, to get inspired, right? Maybe one day you will be at that stage and presenting and hear about what it might be like. But three, you need to be aware of those trials, I think, as a fellow, just for pure academic knowledge that are getting presented at the biggest meeting in the national stage. But those are usually once a day in the morning, 9 a.m., you know, every day that the meeting is on often, and sometimes there are 2 sessions a day. Beyond that, if you have an area of interest, practically or academically, they are usually only in one room. These meetings are organized pretty smartly. If your area of interest is AFib in ACC, I can guarantee you there's one room in a given day that is running AFib from the morning to the evening. So you won't be trying to track sessions from one room to the other and coming back and forth. So if you have an area of interest, I think it's pretty easy to figure out that area. Same as poster sessions. They're usually not scattered. Usually there is the imaging posters in one side and EP posters and interventional posters. So it's a small area that you need to navigate if you want to start somewhere, so that you're not intimidated by how big, you know, the whole poster area is or the whole convention center is. There are fellows in training specific sessions, and they could be more practical in terms of, you know, if for, say, for Heart Rhythm Society, for EP fellows, there was, you know, diagnosing and SVT sessions, et cetera. And those could be really meaningful if you're just looking for more clinical, practical sessions, and they're always there. And then, of course, whatever your research area of interest might be, once I cover the late-breaking sessions and the poster areas that is within my interest, then I go to the next practical or research sessions, which will, again, always be in 1 or at most 2 rooms throughout the whole meeting. I think that's it on my end.
Okay, follow-up question for you. So specifically for procedurally oriented fellows, how do you engage with reps or the industry representatives at in the industry rooms? And you know, they always scan your badge and they take your contact info, and sometimes they'll email you afterwards. But what's the purpose of those interactions with them, and how do you leverage that later?
It's a little bit tricky. I think they're evolving quite a lot recently. Say for the most recent HRS, because it used to be just industry promoting themselves, right? And now, for example, at this HRS, Abbott had a booth on how to use their most recent catheter. And there's a lot of practical things that you can get in there and implant their leadless pacemaker in a simulation model. So it has evolved quite a bit. I think I go there for practical reasons, and sure, if they scan your badge, they scan your badge. That doesn't really, I don't think about it, if I can say that. Sometimes the meetings take place at the booths, probably not at the fellow level, but if you're interested in research and if they say, hey, Natalie, we have this, we're running this or considering this drug trial for heart failure. Why don't you come to the Novartis booth at 1 p.m.? And that might be the reason you're actually with the industry at that booth. So a lot of the meetings regarding the industry take place there. But they're usually there to familiarize you with a new product. For example, Cardia had a new 6-lead EKG thing that they, you know, had a booth just for me to go there and figure out, well, if I'm recommending it to a patient, I want to know what it looks like and if it's working. So I just sat there and tried it and saw the signals and said, oh, this is pretty cool. So EP is a little bit out there. It's heavily industry biased. That's our life. So I feel very comfortable going there and interacting with the people. I don't know, as a fellow, I think it's a great opportunity for you to go there and say, hey, I'm a fellow, tell me how this works. You know, I've been hearing about this Cardia 6-lead ECG, tell me how it works. And you can do that for anything and everything that might interest you at the industry booths.
If I could piggyback onto that too, I think it also depends on what you're looking for as a fellow. For some people in medicine, it's their primary career. For others, like myself, it's a secondary or tertiary career. And so for me, I mean, while yes, I'm an interventional fellow, I'm looking at the different therapeutic technologies that are available. I'm also looking at opportunities to meet industry partners to actually get back into industry, because that's where I was before coming to medicine. So I think it really depends on a kind of more granular level of what you're trying to do as to whether or not it's for some of us as poor fellows that finally get into the attending world to start getting some disclosures, right, and make ancillary revenue streams based off what your revenue generation may be from an academic appointment or a private practice, if you're able to give speakership opportunities and things like that. So I echo that. It's learning everything that's there, and it's the best time to do it as a fellow because it's quote free for us, right? They want us to learn it and use it because that builds market share for them. So they're incentivized to do that, and then allows us to be more comfortable with the products that we can use in order to improve care. So I think it's a win-win.
The other thing, I don't know how it might be relevant for general fellows, but at least for someone like Nikhil or specialized fellows, a lot of how we find jobs post-fellowship are through industry. There's always a Medtronic rep in Boston that knows all the jobs in Boston. So if you're at the stage of your career where you're looking for jobs and there's, and you're an EP fellow and you're in that booth and you say you meet a rep from whatever area, or you can directly ask, hey, I'm interested in a job in the Cincinnati area. Are any of the current reps, from there here today at this meeting? They know, and they know your reputation at your institution too, right? All reps are connected, all industries connected. And if you have a good reputation at your own institution and you have there and then met and made a good impression on some industry partner at an area that you want to work at, be it at University of Chicago or this or that, they will connect you. So I say use that leverage. It has gotten me a lot of job interviews just through the industry connections.
I would say just real quick, also as a fellow, I think it's also a good time to, there might be less offered to you to engage with industry, like with your attendings. But if your attending or mentor wants to bring you into like a closed door meeting or something like that, I would just always say yes, because in terms of whatever your concerns are about disclosures, none of that really matters. And you'll learn a lot about how these discussions happen. Like in some that I've been on just as an early career attending that I've got to go on, it's a lot of like you kind of learn kind of 2 steps ahead what I do heart failure, so like what Abbott is thinking about, like the next generation LVAD and kind of where they are, because people always ask like what's the next step, and if you got a chance to meet with the head of heart failure of Abbott or something, or get in there, it doesn't hurt to listen and also just see kind of what opportunities are out there and what even that world is like, because in the end I think everyone we work very closely with industry in almost all of cardiology in a beneficial way. I know there are risks and all that to that, but it's good to know kind of what's out there, and especially as a fellow. Again, if you're at all concerned about disclosure, so I think it's really kind of a no risk situation to learn.
That's awesome. That's actually
a fellow be equally biased. If you have industry, disclosures that you need to disclose in your Sunshine Act, at least my rule was if there is 20% Abbott, there's 20% Medtronic, 20% something. So it just doesn't raise red flags, at least in my head. That would have been a red flag if there's just one industry throughout that you're getting paid by as a fellow. Might be a minor thing, but something to think about.
That makes sense. That was awesome. Great hot takes there. Well, actually, this is a good segue to introduce Dr. Mark Belkin, so you can get his viewpoints on the highlights for how to attend a conference. So thank you, Tina. That was incredible, and we'll keep you around to answer questions and throughout as well. And just if you need to step off for another meeting, feel free as well. So our next short talk will be from Dr. Mark Belkin, and he's joining us from sunny Chicago. So he's an assistant professor of medicine at the University of Chicago. He received his medical degree from Rush University and went on to complete internal medicine, cardiology, and advanced heart failure and transplant training at the University of Chicago. He's currently an advanced heart failure, cardiac transplant, and MCS support physician at the University of Chicago. He actively participates in clinical research with special interest in cardiac hemodynamics, cardiogenic shock, and left ventricular assist devices. He's working to help identify invasive hemodynamic markers in cardiogenic shock that may help guide individualized treatment decisions and help inform the prognosis for cardiac recovery. We're super excited to have him here today to join us in this amazing professional development session on how to attend a conference. And a personal shout out, Dr. Mark Belkin was my very first CCU fellow, CCU resident when I was an intern at the University of Chicago. So we go way back, and I still learn from him every day across the country. So take it away, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Natalie, and Nikhil, and everyone else. And Tina, that was great. And Natalie also left out that when she was, I feel like she always leaves this part out. We were taking care of a patient that was listed for a heart transplant with a subclavian balloon pump that got married in the hospital while she was waiting for her heart transplant. And we went to like the hospital chapel, and there was like a just married sign on her balloon pump and everything.
That's right. We walked her over to the chapel together. That was
Yes.
our very important role as residents.
Yes, we sat in the back. Anyways, thanks for having me. I put together a couple of PowerPoint slides. If that's, can I share my screen? Is that okay?
Yep, go for it. Are you able to share?
Yeah, it looks like yes. Can you guys see my slides?
Yes.
Just put it in presenter view, or not, or whatever. Let me put the slides on. Okay. So let me just, so I can see these. So yeah, so thanks for having me. Just as a brief disclosure, I'll kind of get into, I'm involved in a couple early career committees, which I'll kind of talk about kind of how to get involved with that. And I guess, these are just my own views, and kind of like Tina was saying, these are just my own musings on kind of having a good time at a conference and going from there. Something Tina talked about, kind of why go to a conference. I think, you opportunity to present research, honestly, learn how to present everything from writing the abstract to making a poster. You'll learn so much in that process. I know throughout residency, actually was doing EP research then, Tina. That sounds like you did heart failure fellowship briefly. So I kind of dabbled the other way, kind of learning, again, how to put those together. If you get an oral presentation, how to make succinct slides and all those kinds of things. Those are all experiences. And especially as the earlier you do them as a resident, as a fellow, when you present, you can say like you're a resident, and they'll be less hard on you. And overall, they're good experiences to learn for yourself, get your name out there. Education wise, obviously there's a ton of sessions that are very specific to, if you want to learn about AFib, heart failure, whatever it is, STEMI care, whatever it is. But then there's also, seeing and how trials get presented. You start to see kind of the order, the organization of it, and that kind of informs how you do research, how you one day present research. Networking. That at the beginning, I think you're focused more on the research education part, and as you move through from residency to fellowship and then into early career, which is where I am now. I guess for what it's worth, I'm first year faculty, so kind of just finished fellowship last June. That was in Natalie's intro. But you kind of shift more into, you start to get to know more people, and you have more collaborative research ideas, and it becomes more about networking. There's always a chance for fun and travel as well, whether you're visiting friends or family on the side of the conference, whether you get to go to Nice for ISHLT as a resident, whatever the options are, these are, that doesn't hurt as well. In terms of, went into this as well, I think some pros and cons of the different types of conferences you can go to. So starting with more national conferences, so these will look, the best on your CV in the sense of, obviously an abstract to ACC or AHA is great, let alone oral presentation. That being said, they're much bigger conferences, way less likely to get an oral presentation. If you do, they are doing more of these moderated oral presentations now, which are nice because you do get kind of a 3-5 minute thing to go. And I think you kind of mark it down as oral or moderated posters. The late breakers cannot emphasize enough. If you go to ACC, AHA, any of the big conferences, if you have the pleasure of, I've never been to ESC in August in Europe, those every morning, do not miss those. You're going to remember, like I was at ACC in New Orleans 2019 when Partner 3 came out as TAVR and low risk patients, and there's like a standing ovation in the room because it wasn't just non-inferior, superior. There's just like kind of seeing that moment when these New England Journal trials and they like unveil the KM curve. Although recently they all seem to be neutral, but anyways, or another SGLT2 inhibitor, works for everything. You kind of want to be, it's fun to be in the room, honestly, kind of where it happens. Which I have more GIFs later, and I'm realizing I could have used a nice Hamilton GIF there, but nonetheless. And then there's also, I will say, the smaller ones also have fit programming, but there is a lot of ACC and HA are really good about having like these like networking, like in like the expo area, they'll have like the couches you sit around, and they'll have some senior faculty come through and give talks, kind of like what Natalie and Nikhil organized here today, but with people way more senior than myself. Oh, sorry, I had those things there. So then for specialty clinics, I'm heart failure, so I know kind of heart failure focused. So what I think of when I think of heart failure specialty clinics, I then think of HFSA and ISHLT. And these are, as you think more about that, it's as you get more specific and beyond, let's say, general cardiology, if you choose to subspecialize, you start to realize you go to ACC and AHA and you're trying to find or network this with the same people or go to the same types of sessions. It just becomes harder to find. So you're lucky you find the AFib room that you're there all day. But if you just want to do AFib talks and you're running around the huge convention centers, at HA and ACC, sometimes, and you're like, I'm just trying to go to the same place, or I guess talk about HFpEF, let's say, HFSA and ICHLT, it's much easier to find, that, and those people are just in a smaller area for you to run into and network with, and see at the hotel bar and things like that. There's also higher likelihood of oral presentations. Particularly, you'll start to learn the flavor of different conferences. I know for heart failure, for instance, ISHLT is like big on oral presentations, and most of the sessions are actually built around kind of oral presentation after oral presentation, which is both good for you. I got to present as resident, present as fellow, but also it's fun to watch because instead of like rehashing more or less a review of some topic, you're saying that topic, but kind of at truly the cutting edge of what was, even if it's like a 50-person prospective study, this isn't late breakers, but this is like, oh, wow, that's an interesting finding, and that's in my field of interest, and that might spark your own research interest. So I think there's a lot to be fun. In the end, I think actually ISHLT and HFSA are probably, as a heart failure person, my favorite, or my favorite conferences. And then there's kind of, which, I was kind of mentioned, these kind of, again, this is in the heart failure world, these like niche or regional conferences, where there'll be, so for instance, Houston Shock Symposium, I think they're in their 5th year. They had one room, it's interventional and heart failure there pretty much. Everything's in that room. So there's no, what talk do I go to? I don't want to miss it. They have fellow abstract competitions. So there is an opportunity to present. I know THT, for instance, they had all the I think they had 2 or 3 rooms. I didn't make it this year, but there were posters right outside the doors. And so basically you kind of, in their smaller conferences, like let's say 2,000 people compared to 30,000. And, THT and like everyone who's anyone in heart failure, except for me, apparently, was there this year, and Natalie wasn't there, but I'm just kidding. And so, but they're all walking out room to room, and you can stand there's a fellow just next to your poster, and they're going to stop and they're going to talk, and faculty want to interact with fellows, and having the opportunity there with your posters there. So sometimes those are great places to do it, and then also locally. So I'm sure, I don't know for sure, but I know Illinois has I think there's an Illinois ACC one every year. There's a Chicagoland, ACC kind of funded trainee abstract competition type thing. Especially if you're thinking of jobs in your local area or your next fellowship in your local area. Maybe you want to go to a hospital across town or keep your options open. People, leaders will be at those as well. And so making sure to present there as well is a good option, even though it's within your city and also cheaper, you're not traveling. In terms of planning ahead for conferences, I think something good to think about, less airport here, but more the hotel. Keep in mind where the hotel is compared to the conference center. If possible, I always stay at the hotel attached to the conference center. You never know when you need to run back, grab something, change for dinner. You want to take a nap or something quickly. The closer you are, if you're not an Uber ride away, it makes it easier and of course cheaper in terms of Uber rides. I personally, hotels, you can cancel up to 3 days in advance for most hotels. So honestly, when I know I'm going to a conference, I'll just book the main hotel off the bat before they run out of rooms. And then you can always cancel if your plans change. And then kind of just be aware of like when you're flying out there and you're planning, are you going to get your poster delivered to the conference? Are you going to bring it with? Make sure it's printed in time. Some of that stuff you kind of forget about until you're all of a sudden kind of a couple of days before the conference. So be aware of that kind of stuff. Speaking of hotels, so expenses. So obviously it can be very expensive to go to a conference. First and foremost, be aware of your own, programs, how much they're able to reimburse you. Most, in my experience, have been flexible in that especially if you're presenting and it's a domestic conference, usually you can convince them to sometimes go a little bit above. In my experience, I'm talking to trainees, even kind of post-COVID, I think so many people use less conference funds that some people don't even realize they're there anymore. And if you go bug your program director, you might be one of a handful of people actually going to conference, in kind of our as post-COVID world. A couple, I know ISHLT, for instance, every year does travel awards, like $1,000 if you're presenting, that a lot of people don't know about. And you have I feel like from experience and colleagues' experience, like a 50-50 shot of getting them. And they're easy applications, so like a paragraph or something, and you just say I have an abstract. At times it's just like if you're presenting, you just have to like go in and click that you're doing it. We've covered industry a little bit. I think industry travel awards, they're going to be something like $1,000. They're available. it'll end up on your Sunshine Act, but not in anything that, you know, is enough to consider any disclosure if you're worried about, you know, things down the line and want to keep things open. And then of course, you know, I would say share a hotel room with a friend to make that cheaper. Or as a resident at AHA, we did like an Airbnb between three or four of us to make things cheaper. If you are on a budget between how much you can get back in terms of reimbursement, but definitely like push to get reimbursement. And also again, if you're like I know this is mostly fellows, but you know, internal medicine residency program gives you X amount, then go to your cardiology or go to your mentor and see if they have research funds that'll help fund you to go. Also for planning ahead, you want to download the conference app, obviously, and look through that and get familiar with it. And then Contino was saying this, just post on social media, say you're going, you know, whether it's in response to the official, like, you know, HA says who's coming, you know, you can quote tweet it, you can reply to it, just say, you know, you can tag people that you know, tag people that you want to meet up with. It gives a sense, even as Tina was saying, I also fully condone the stalking situation. And then when you say, you know, hi, you know, even if you say, hi, I just want to meet you and say, I'm Mark. Sometimes they'll be like, oh yes, I saw you on Twitter, you know, because if you've tagged them and definitely don't go overboard on this kind of stuff. But, you know, in general, they know that you're their network. At times you can tell people are busy if you just want to say hello, put your face there, because then the first time they're not gonna remember you. But if you're truly doing, you know, research or you're kind of, you know, you're working closely in their field, they'll start to recognize you. And those like kind of quick meetups can help and use social media to your advantage there. And kind of, you know, let people know that you're coming. And also I would say specifically promote your work. If you have a poster or you have an oral presentation, you know, Saturday, 3 p.m, room A500, I'm going to be speaking about HFpEF and AFib during a STEMI, you know, combining all of our stuff. And then people, you know, might want to come out or they'll promote it. And at least they see that you're active in research and you're presenting, and that's kind of put out there. When kind of terms of making the most out of the conference, I already talked about the late breakers. Similarly, like for instance, in the heart failure world, ICHLT has less late breakers. They have plenary sessions, same with HFSA. And those are kind of, at first I was really confused what they were and everyone was running to them every morning. They kind of, it's where like they set out kind of what was the year for ISHLT in the world of heart transplantation, what is going forward. There's some formalities like the president switches over, but they give like very kind of, you know, they'll give a 15-minute interesting speech. They'll highlight some of like the top abstracts. You see some interesting studies there, and really kind of get a sense of like their finger on the pulse of what is happening in the field this year. And it's kind of almost like a keynote address. And so as you kind of enter these fields is a good opportunity to kind of, I think they're very interesting when you're there, and when there aren't late breakers, I think I would for sure go to those. They're usually every morning and usually the only thing going on. In terms of kind of optimizing your schedule, again, things will happen at the same time. When I use the conference app, when the first time I go through it, let's say a week before, I'll click whatever I'm interested in. I just add to my calendar, even if there are 3 or 4 of them are 2 p.m. on Sunday. When it gets closer, I start looking. First of all, I'll get a sense of, okay, well, I already went to that one kind of talk. I don't want to go to the same one again. And also looking closer at like, if there's a certain speaker, maybe someone actually you met the night before and you want to go see them talk or something like that, or you heard about a talk, or again, just speakers that you like. The session formats, sometimes they can be like 3 20-minute lectures and you're a little bit like, I'm going to fall asleep after lunch. But then you go to instead pick the one that's like a debate that's going to get like, there'll be jokes, there'll be, you know, hot and spicy and everyone's laughing, and you'll learn a lot. And so like, you know, tend towards those. Anything that is kind of interactive and geared towards fellows, I think especially a lot of, you mentioned Sky, you know, HFSA does a lot of that with like LVAD troubleshooting and CPX and all this kind of stuff. Go to all of those. They're geared towards fellows. They're meant for your learning. There'll be leaders in the field leading it there. And then any sort of networking events. I know HFSA every year does speed mentoring. It's not a job fair. It's just you kind of, I met, you know, 3 or 4 people a year. We sit one-on-one with them for like 10 minutes, talk about training, job stuff. And honestly, I've started to, you know, meet, that's part of how I've met some of the leaders in the field and kind of seemingly, you know, you go to same people go to networking every year. It's a nice place to touch base in the non-stalking way. And then, you know, support each other. You know, I'm sure a lot of you on this call know each other. You guys have friends that are fellows in California at other programs. If they're presenting and you're there, try your best to stop by their poster, go to the oral presentation. Even, you know, I have friends that don't do heart failure. I was at AHA. Stop by if you can, stop by their talks, support them on social media, that kind of stuff. And same with your institutional colleagues. I think ideally, again, supporting your institution. Everyone's proud of, usually proud of their institution, and show that lots of people, including yourself, are doing research at these things. And kind of we talk about industry. The expo hall is a ton of fun. That's usually right in the center. Between sessions, people often congregate there, usually because there's free like coffee and snacks. All of the industry things have their own like cappuccino machine. Just find the one with the shortest line, get their cappuccino, start using their drug, whatever it is. I jest, but also that's also, especially at these, I don't know, like for me, I say to the HFSA, that's kind of where everyone congregates in the middle there, especially between sessions. Around lunchtime is always like purposeful 30-minute gaps, and that's where you're going to just like bump into people, and that's where, like Tina said, you bump into your mentor, let's say from your previous institution, and they're like, oh, did you know Mark? Like, let's, and right there you've met someone, and again, and maybe not that first time, but that second time, or the next meeting when you say hello again, they start to know who you are and they associate you with their, with your attending. And so it's a great place to be, and also to caffeinate. Poster sessions are a ton of fun. They're different, I think, in every conference. So like, ACC, I will say the post sessions are just ongoing the whole time, and maybe people aren't around, maybe more of the moderate post sessions. But like, for instance, ISHLT, as an example, and I assume other conferences and others, especially like this ISHLT, those are sessions like 5 to 6:30. It's after the sessions. It's in one relatively small place. There's free wine and beer. Everyone shows up, like attendings, fellows, and are truly like milling around, will talk to you outside your poster. They will usually show genuine interest because, the same, like, no matter kind of how old you, if you see that it's in your field of interest, you want to know what they did. And you're going to have usually constructive feedback, or, and you'll see who's doing that research. And then as those people grow and join the field, it's a great opening to that. And it's, like, again, similarly, a great networking place, and, a great way to support your colleagues as well. And also gain even your own research ideas. And I don't, of course, mean scooping anyone, but just something can trigger a research idea for you when you see how someone else uses a certain database or had a certain type of question. In terms of social media engagement, I know that, I think that was on the list as well. If you're going to plan to live tweet something, try and sit up close. It's always frustrating. Don't take a picture if you're stuck in the back. Some are just crowded rooms, but no one really wants to see on Twitter like a sideways blurry picture and you say, no, I swear this was good. So if you're really interested in something and you're planning to, kind of try to plan ahead and get a little early and get kind of a good seat, if you will, know the conference hashtags. If you're someone who likes to use social media, wants to grow that, be aware of the speaker and ideally even the moderators' handles. The moderators honestly are the ones you'll see are tweeting during it also. If they're social media savvy, the speakers will reach you afterwards or engage with you. And if it is a specific field that there's leaders in that you know of, tag them in it as well. Both, they're going to be interested in it, and they may, engage with you, and that may be again a way to network using social media at conferences. Kind of getting back to the industry stuff. So dinners. I feel like they kind of group into kind of dinners with your peers. I mean, like, let's say your co-fellows, dinners with your mentors, and industry dinners. Meals with your peers are amazing, especially if, like, let's say you've been, you're used to train together, you're separated, right? They're always low key. That's your chance to vent about anything, especially like lunches, you're going to split the meal. Anytime your mentor has to go to dinner, you should go, right? They're thanking you, or an institutional dinner, usually at, for us at ISHLT, the heart failure group goes to dinner with the cardiac surgery group every year. Go to that. That's a great place to network within your institution, with maybe some attendings you don't see as often, and it's just, you see a different side of attendings. I know we're all fellows, so it's definitely different than residency, but it is nice to see people kind of relax, talk about things sometimes that aren't just work related. Industry dinners, again, using the same kind of examples. There's kind of two flavors to these. I feel like there's some are like kind of a mix of institutional industry where like the rep takes, your group out to dinner, which is, again, I would just go for it. There's some that are the larger ones where, they're like industry dinners have this speaker and it's kind of this widespread RSVP, and it's going to be a big room, and you can RSVP and not go, you cannot go, or you cannot RSVP and then go, depending on kind of what your friends and colleagues are doing. I think feel free to be fluid around dinner time in terms of like where you want to go last minute. I wouldn't worry about industry dinners if anyone is on the call. I think it's the same as, the lunches that people may or may not have. I don't know if we're supposed to have them anymore. So if we're not, we don't have them, definitely. The lunches at work, it's the same types of thing. You put your name down, they're going to mark you down for $100 worth of something and it won't come, I don't think, to bite you. Those are often just, I feel like in my experience, a lot of just everyone kind of flocks there because even attendings, no one wants to be buying meals for everyone at every meal. And so when you go to the industry dinner and you're barely even sitting with it, you're sitting with your own group or your mentor and their colleagues, and you get to meet people at those types of things. And someone's just saying, yes, your mentor invites you to like they have like the like trial working groups. It's sort of smaller meetings that they use that to have those types of meetings as they're building trials, and sometimes they'll be able to bring you along. It's a great place to sit and learn. And so definitely, I would go to those things. Conference follow-up. So that being said, so now you've networked, you've met some people, shaken some hands, gotten some emails, got to talk about your research idea. If you're really interested, follow up. Not the next day, everyone's tired on Sunday or Monday and flying home. People are catching up on their inboxes from work and whatnot. Wait a week or two, but I think not really longer than that. And, send a nice to meet you. And even if it's someone that you're planning to network with more, always fine to say it's nice to meet you. Mark, look forward to seeing you in the next conference. If you had discussed following up on a research project idea and they seem interested, you can always throw it out there. In general, I think especially more senior people, they get a lot of that kind of interaction. And so if you're truly interested, follow up on it. And I think, that's helpful. Depending on your level of comfort with social media and want to be on there, again, engaging in social media, talking about finding out the conference, what sessions were good, engaging with people that you networked with there and are, new Twitter friends. I do feel like at least for me around kind of COVID, there was so much Twitter collegiality going on, and it became so much less. We were the first conferences kind of post-COVID. It became totally normal to say, hey, I know you from Twitter. And that was a totally normal thing to do. And I think it's now become the norm that you're allowed to do that and not be that weird, especially, if it's someone that you guys clearly interact on Twitter and things like that. And then I think this is more just, I think it's, if you learned a lot, if you were at late breakers, things like that, you can always offer to, I think report back to your institution with some quick takeaways of what you learned at the conference. I think this is one of my last slides. So then planning for next year. So these are ways to then, you've went to your first conference, you had a good time, met some people, start looking out for options to join society committees. There's almost always open calls to join committees. Some are specifically fellow or early career committees. Some are just, you can join, just kind of apply within, I want to join heart failure or the EP committee, even like ACC. They want fellows, they want early career, they want mid-career, they want late career, they want people, gender, diversity, geography. These are things they're all interested in. And so apply. I applied, I think, to like 1 or 2 a year for a while in residency. I finally got into an HA one, the acute care committee, learned a ton just as a fellow rep. There was less that I was personally involved in. We did some social media stuff as fellows, but like watching them turn out scientific statements, how they developed them, and seeing the more senior people, how they developed kind of these like, these 10,000 word reviews and how they built the outline, how they included people in authorship. There's a lot to learn, and then it gets your foot in the door. And then, like I cycled off as a fellow, but then they reached back out to me to join as early career. And so once your foot's in the door, one term ends on one committee. And I would say if and when you get onto any sort of committee, the key thing that I'm sure you guys, you guys are all fellows, we're this far in life. It's if someone tasks you with something or you volunteer something, just follow through on it. If you do, I feel like, some people that don't, and that's fine, and they'll roll off the committee and no one's going to be that interested in bringing them back on again. But if you show engagement and do your work and do it on time or whatever you volunteer for, that's going to just open the next door and the next door within these societies, these committees. The thing that I kind of started taking advantage of only like a year ago, has not panned out yet, I will say, but I know some people have, is session proposals. I didn't I always ignored them when they said we want session proposals. I assumed they wanted someone else to do that. And then especially if you have for your first one, work with a mentor, if you have an idea, you're saying, I do research in this topic, I think this would be a really interesting debate at HFSA or HA or any of them, it gets harder, obviously, the bigger it is, but you write up a draft, there's forms how to do it, you suggest speakers, and then you can put yourself as the moderator, or you can put, your mentor's moderator, and maybe if you're like, this is in my wheelhouse of my research, and I feel that I want maybe an opportunity to speak, put yourself as a speaker. And when these pan out, that's how you end up as, again, it has not been me, to be honest, but I've co-fellows and co-early career colleagues that are on the stage a good amount. And a lot of it starts with they submitted a session that they were interested in, moderated it or spoke at it, did a good job. And then someone else saw that and they did a session proposal for the next year. And they're like, oh, that person did a really good job in their early career. We want to make sure we have some early career. Because also, all the conferences also want a mix of early, mid, late career, geography, gender, diversity, all that. They want all of that. And so getting your name out there, doing a good job with it. And it's okay to take things in your own hands and not just submit an abstract, but submit something like a session proposal. And then I always say, and definitely as you're doing research, I think, again, as everyone here, I think is a fellow, you've already applied for fellowship. But keep in mind, fellowship, these conference abstracting deadlines, even just to keep your own research going as you start your career. When you start getting mentees, I always, as I'm starting to get a few of them, you kind of talk about what is the project we're going to do, and you start setting goals. I know October-ish is always the ISHLT deadline. We love going to ISHLT. Let's make that a goal, and that kind of gives you a target to move forward. And kind of altogether, just this isn't a talk about wellness, and there are definitely times to say no. I think early in your career and relate to things like this, whether it's a committee, I would say just say yes. And even if it's not the exact committee you want to be on, even if you apply to ACC, because it's a pretty generic one for ACC, I think. And if they say, hey, we're going to make you a fellow on the ACC budget committee, if that exists. I don't know anything about it. But the thing is, you're going to learn a lot. And if you kind of show up, this half of life showing up and do a good job, someone on that committee is going to then, be like, oh, wow, Mark was always there at the budget committee meetings. Let's, and now he's applying for the Heart Failure Committee. You can say, I did a good job in the budget committee, and they'll bring you on, and they'll bring you on to that. So I would say that at this stage, kind of say yes to most things that interest you, but it's okay to say no sometimes. And that's all I have for slides. So I'll stop sharing.
Can I say something? That was great, Mark. That's huge what you just said, that if you show up to some committee that may or may not even interest you, and get visibility there because you are the only hardworking fellow in that committee, you may just be a moderator in the next meetings, because the people in that committee who are chairing those committees are often in the program committees for some other meeting that are in charge of making the sessions and putting, say, Natalie as the session moderator or the speaker, etc. So it's definitely huge for visibility, as much as it may not seem like the exciting committee that you want to take part at.
No, for sure. And even now I'm getting my first taste on the HFSA Early Career Committee. We're putting together some programs for HFSA this year. And there's a lot of, they're picking speakers. And again, it's as I've said, it's this mix of career, geography, diversity, all those important things. But when you look at who's being recommended, people obviously know people that they either have or have currently trained with, either currently or in the past. Obviously, people know the leaders in the field, but even sometimes, like, oh, well, that person talks every year. Who can we think of? And I don't know. I was looking for one. I was looking for someone to talk about CPET stuff, and I was like, I don't. I'm having trouble thinking of who else could be. I went on Twitter and typed like who talks about CPET all the time. And so like that's where I think social media engagement and just being someone who, if you have an interest, talk about it. And I also looked on Google Scholar and stuff too, but that kind of gets hard because if a paper 5 years ago and their first author, now they're not even in the field, it gets, but if someone's actively talking about something, you've seen it before. Again, so both with social media and again, the networking, someone you met at a meeting, they're going to reach out and be like, oh, who was that fellow that was with you? Tina at HRS. Let's bring them on.
If someone does invite you for a fellow specific event at a meeting, say at ACC or HRS, they might be the program makers who are kind of senior fellows for the fellow specific event at the meeting. I think it's okay to reach out to them saying, hey, I would love to be involved in the program committee for FITs. How can I join you? Because they are going to get older, right? They won't always want to do the fellow specific events, and they want to pass the torch to someone. I think it's a great idea if you get approached to participate in an event, then to ask how can you participate in moderating, in actually forming the event. Just like that, I was at HRS fellows or early career program, and then you get to pick all of your topics and put yourself in the program, etc. And will be a fun experience for you if you get that chance.
Yeah. 100%. I've had some experience of people, or similarly, actually, someone who was on a cardiac critical care type working group wasn't actually that interested in it and was like, hey, my interests have shifted. Mark, is interested in this. You should, and it always helps when someone recommends you because people are looking for names and, networking. Really, so we're just driving.
Maybe Mark has already mentioned that, but it is crucial to mark the deadlines for the meetings because time flies when you're a fellow. So it's good to have somewhere on your calendar that says ACC abstract deadline, just the all-day event. Just put an ACC, HRS, or sorry, AHA, or if you're subspecialty, put in all of them that just float there. So if you have a research idea, that you may propose that might motivate your mentors to saying, oh, why don't we submit that to AHA? It's not always your mentor that should remind you that, hey, let's get it through AHA. You can motivate your own ideas and projects towards your mentors that is the deadline. I think it's good to note these deadlines and also good to note the conferences of the following year. So ACC for 3 years ahead is already, the dates, locations are there. Because you're a poor fellow, you're going to ask for days off requests months ahead, right? If you definitely want to go somewhere, you don't want to be on a CCU rotation during that meeting. So if you feel passionately about a meeting to attend, I think you really want to have them on your calendar, abstract deadlines as well as a meeting, so you get some chance of making it there.
I agree. Yeah. Every year when a meeting ends, I kind of put in the next year's in the calendar, or if I have like FOMO about missing a meeting, like I missed Houston Shock for 2 years when I put out my next year calendar, it ends up not kind of, eventually you have priorities, can't go to every meeting, but kind of keep it there. So at least you're generally aware when it's coming. I will say maybe just maybe this might be more of an early career tip as you guys move on to there from fellows, just to kind of spark this idea. I think as a fellow and as a trainee, definitely the weekend meetings are easier to get to because you have so many commitments. What I've learned very quickly is early career, weekends they're always valuable. But especially if you want to get more and more involved, there's a lot of meetings. Actually, what I've noticed is there's some that happen on like weekdays. So again, in Heart Fellows, ISHLT is like Tuesday until like Saturday morning, so basically Tuesday to Friday. And as you hit early career, you can actually usually it's not even if you're doing a conference, you just have to cancel like a clinic or two, make sure you're not on service. And it's kind of a work week meeting, both, as with family life, personal life, things like that, not kind of taking up another weekend. If you think about all of these conferences you want to go to. And so I think even as you're kind of prioritizing which meetings to go to through the years, if this is something you want to go to 3 or 4, more during the year as you grow in your career, I think those I tend to like a little more kind of post fellowship because you have the opportunity. I know you don't as much as a fellow.
I just want to say a quick goodbye. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Nikhil. Mark, very nice meeting you. I'll log off, but thanks again.
Thank you so much, Tina. That was awesome. Mark, I know we want to be respectful of your time too, but I did have a follow-up question for something that you had mentioned about, advertising your own session. You're having a poster, you should tweet about it. In terms of Twitter etiquette, let's say you tweet about your poster session. Would you tag someone that you really look up to on Twitter and you want them to know about your poster, or is that inappropriate?
I generally make sure I tag either in like the tweet or like the subsequent tweet all of the authors, because you want to make sure you're giving them credit. And also sometimes they'll engage with it too then. Although most of my mentors honestly are not hanging out on Twitter much, so the tagging them is just for like posterity. I don't do as I'm sure I have done that. I think I do that. I think not like a ton, but there's 2 or 3 people that it's very much. I think now that I've done a little more networking, there's some people I do know at other institutions that I know have the same interest. I will tag them in it and kind of knowing that they'll be interested in it. I think some people do. I'm not a big I'm not going to tag 20 people who have nothing to do with the project that are just leaders in the field. Everything that kind of turns to a little bit of spam. I think etiquette-wise, I think it's totally fine if it's in their field of interest. You think they find it interesting, I think it's fine to tag them. And honestly, they might not like it, they might not retweet it, but we all look at our phones. They might at least glance and say, oh, that's interesting, and kind of, log somewhere in their brain for when it's needed in the future.
Awesome.
And then in terms of promotion, I think it's Akil Narang, he's at Northwestern now, he's a U of C. He was big into, I feel like when cardio Twitter stuff first started, like the early, like 2014, these all the etiquette stuff. I remember watching when I was a fellow, he did a talk about kind of Twitter etiquette. And he talked about like a rule of like thirds, like a third of your Twitter can kind of be self-promoting, a third should be kind of promoting others. And then I think was like a third would be should be kind of within like a subject that you're kind of that you find interesting. And so to the point being, and I say that in this case, it's okay to be self-promoting. Obviously, if that's all you tweet about and you ignore everyone else on Twitter, that's not kind of being a good colleague. But that being said, it's if you're not going to promote your poster, not a lot of people are gonna, unless the right person walks by, I guess.
That makes sense. That's amazing. I want to make sure anyone who has any burning questions is able to ask before we let everyone go. Anybody with the last question?
I have a question. I'm a PGY2 internal medicine from New York. Looking to apply to programs outside of New York, and I was wondering how I could use these conferences as a platform to showcase my interest in a specific program.
That is a great question. Which in the end, I stayed for so many years. But I think overall, I think if there's a program that you're kind of targeting, or like we can use Chicago, for example. There's like 4 or 5 programs here. And let's say you want to go to Chicago, particularly if you have a field of interest, like let's say you're applying cardiology, and again, just because that's what I know mostly, you want to do heart failure, and you're like, I'm going to go to HFSA or ISHLT. I think for looking at the program, seeing is one of our heart failure people at University of Chicago speaking somewhere. You kind of like Tina said, whether you watch the whole session or catch them at the end, try to talk to them and say, I'm Arun, I'm in New York and I'm applying. I have a family in Chicago. I'm specifically trying to go to Chicago. I want to do heart failure. Can I, is it okay if I email you or something like that, right? Because even to keep it brief, right? Like again, as Tina said, a lot of the attendees are running around between advisory board meetings and all this nonsense. But most people be like, yeah, send me an email. And then that goes to kind of my follow-up of then follow up, a week or 2 after the conference, send them an email. And at minimum, they'll be like free to, answer a few questions, or now kind of your name is not just another name in a stack of papers or whatever, but now they kind of know you. So I would do those kinds of things. Same things with, you can see posters from people at that institution. If there's, fellows have less say, I think, in who gets into fellowship than in the end. But I think if there's fellows you want to talk to find out about programs, go talk about the research and say, like, I'm looking at University of Chicago's fellowship program. What do you think about that?
Right.
So I think those kinds of things, that's where I think the program, like the app and the program will help you kind of figure out where to go. And then honestly, just separately from conferences, if you have anyone at your institution who has any connections to people in Chicago, any sort of networking in that sense, if your mentor knows someone at Northwestern or whatever,
right.
having them reach out is always, like the best thing that someone can do to help you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Good question. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. I think we will let everyone go. Nikhil, is there anything else you want to end with?
So sorry, I just thank you to our speakers this evening, for everybody for attending. Natalie, thank you as always for being the quarterback that is driving this wonderful set of programming forward.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And thanks to our FIT committee, lots of members here who helped organize these events. And thank you, Mark. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
See you at the meetings.
See you at the meetings.
You.